I think I just missed Stephen's intro, so my apologies there, but let's go ahead and get started. And if anyone has a question, I'm sure Stephen told you this, chat him up and he'll come get me if there's something wrong with the presentation or if anybody needs me to go back or slow down a little bit. So, okay, so today we're going to be talking about some tips and tricks for email. And email is such a huge area. There's so many good and bad practices out there. And I kind of wanted to zero in on basically three things today. The first being, how do you get people to just open your email? That's sort of getting your foot in the door. And then after they open it, how do you get them to actually pay attention to what's in it? How do you get them to read it? And I'm going to make a slightly surprising statement about that when we get there. And then finally, how do you get people to do something from your email? So, okay, let's get started. So first thing we'll talk about is getting your email open rates up. First thing you have to do is, of course, get the email delivered. So if you're building emails that are looking kind of spammy, you know your chances of getting into someone's inbox are going to go way, way down. I'm sure some of you know some of these things already. Just to cover our bases, let's talk about some things that can make you look kind of spammy. So first and foremost, you want to avoid the spam trigger words. And some of these are, of course, super silly. Some of my favorites that I've seen were cash, 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 and you know, score with babes. I'm sure you guys aren't putting anything like that in your email, but there are some surprising ones as well. So I provided a link here to one of the many lists of spam trigger words, which you guys can peruse at your leisure. But I wanted to talk about just a few that I could see being in a nonprofit email and maybe you wouldn't think of as being a spam trigger. So those are things like opt-in, do it today, dear friend, being a member, and please read. So just a good idea to kind of have in the back of your mind, review the spam trigger words every now and then and make sure that you're not really putting any of those in your email. Okay, next up, exclamation points. Don't use them. You can use them minimally if it's appropriate, but most of the time you're just fine to use a regular period and helps you to stop looking so spammy. Don't use all capitals. As much as possible, just avoid this. I'm sure you guys know in the internet world, all capitals is the equivalent of sort of yelling at somebody, and you don't need to yell at your readers. The next one is that you want to try and balance your text to image ratio. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later when we talk about images, but you just don't want to have it be overwhelmingly image heavy and really, really light on the text. Spammers do that sometimes because they're lazy and they can put all kinds of spammy words in an image that then the text reader can't see. So you don't want to look like that. And another thing that I always recommend is before you send the email out, run it through a spam checker. And this is one that I really, really like, this mailtester.com. You go to the mailtester.com site, they will give you an email address, and all you need to do is just take a quick second to copy it, and then in your email, send a test and paste that spam checker email right in there and send it off. It'll take it about, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes to receive the email, and then you can click the button here to check your score, and it'll give you this nice rating. You're looking for something that's, you know, 7, 8, 9 out of 10. Anything less than that, you might want to start to worry. And down here at the bottom, it'll give you some tips about what it did and did not like about your email. So always a good idea to run it through a spam checker like that prior to sending, just to make sure you don't look spammy. Some other things that you can do, I guess this is really just one thing, and I am repeating myself here on this slide. Don't paste your content in from Word. I know it's really tempting if you have a Word document that already has your text in it and that you already like the formatting, to just copy and paste that into the email editor. But the problem with that is that Word does not create nice, clean HTML formatting. So when you paste that into the HTML editor and design your email, the editor tries to make sense of Word's HTML, but sometimes it just can't. It can mess up your template, and then when you send it off, it can make you look like you are not legit. You're, a spammer. You're not somebody that they want the recipient to get the email from. So always a good idea. If you have the text in Word and you want to use it in your email, just copy it into a program like Notepad. Save it in there. It'll strip off all of that extraneous formatting, and then you can just copy it straight from that Notepad file and paste it into your email. Okay, some other things. You've gotten through the spam filter, which is step 1. Step 2 is how can you make someone interested enough in your email to actually open it up and read it. So the subject line is kind of like your envelope in a direct mail piece, right? If the person is not intrigued by your subject line, if it's not clear, if it's too long even, then these are all things that can keep people from actually wanting to open and read your email. So clear, brief, and interesting is always a good idea for your subject line. And when we say clear, so let's talk about that. So if they can't really tell what they're going to get out of reading your email, it's kind of like, why are they going to spend any time reading it? Now you can play devil's advocate here and say, well, if I make it a little unclear, it's a mystery that might get people to click, and you can do that sometimes. But I find that it's usually better to just go with a really clear subject line so that people know what they're getting into in the email. So an example here, a word from People for Puppies. That's an okay subject line, but it's just, what's this going to be about? What is this word that you're going to have with me? I would rather know before I spend my time clicking on your email and reading it, what exactly am I going to get out of it? So a better way to word that might be something like 10 ways you can save puppies. Okay, I'm not telling the whole story. There's still incentive for the person to actually go into the email and check it out, but I am telling them this is what you're going to get out of this. Okay. So I mentioned before that your subject line should be brief. And what I've been finding from 20 characters is probably the absolute max that you'd want to use for most audiences. Now some audiences, if you're talking to maybe a highly scientific group and they're okay with more words, more jargon, more text to kind of look over and be more specific about what they're getting, awesome. You know your audience, you do what's right for them. But as a general rule of thumb, you want to keep it a little bit more brief. So I'll give you an example here for 10 ways you can save puppies from the plight of parvovirus. Oh my gosh, I'm bored. I'm not going to read this email. It's just going to be too long for me. So maybe a little bit better way to go about this. 10 ways you can save puppies from parvo. It's a little shorter, just a little bit less time for me to kind of scan through it and assimilate what I'm going to get out of this email. Maybe a higher chance that I'm actually going to read it. And kind of think of it this way, if you are the person receiving the email and you're getting something with this multiple line subject, you might be thinking to yourself, gosh, they can't even write every subject line. This email is just going to take me forever to get through. I'm not going to read it right now. Okay, so the last thing, interesting. This is where things get a little fuzzier. I can't really say for sure what's going to be interesting to your audience, but there are some things that are generally true. If it's going to be something useful and specific, that's a little more interesting to the person. You can put some words in there that evoke urgency. I would caution against doing that when it's not really urgent. You don't really want to be the emailer who cried wolf, because if everything's urgent from you, then nothing is urgent. So play around with that. Urgent type words, time sensitive, things like that can be useful if there truly is some urgency behind it. Evoking emotion. There's all kinds of interesting lists of things out there about these are words that evoke emotion. And you can play around with, too, whether it has to be positive emotion. Sometimes a negative emotion is just as interesting and will get people to actually read your email. So good idea to kind of peruse some of those lists, see what those emotion trigger words are, and see if maybe you want to incorporate them into your subject line. And then lastly, inspire curiosity. There are some really interesting tips in the article I've linked to here about what actually can pique someone's interest, what can make them curious. So I would highly encourage you guys to go out there, take a look at that, and see the things that they suggest. One of them is something about like sort of violating someone's expectation. So you can say something like, puppies really don't need you to save them. And then they read that from an animal welfare organization and go, well, what do you mean? That's what you're all about. So that might, tempt someone to click on your email and actually see what you're saying. Okay, so some examples I have saved puppies from parvo. And, that's, it's okay. It tells them what it is. It's brief. That's good, but maybe not very interesting. So then I have rescued 10 puppies from parvo this month. A little bit more urgent. Talks to me about maybe the idea that if I don't do this, then these poor puppies are not going to be rescued. This emotion here, they need the rescue. And then another way you could phrase that is maybe rescue 10 puppies from parvo in 5 minutes. So just a couple different ways you can do that. Some other things you can do, questions are interesting sometimes. So a question like, what do puppies need most? I don't know. Maybe I should find out. If I'm an animal lover and I give to animal organizations, it's a good idea for me to know what puppies need. Numbers in your subject line, so 5 as opposed to F-I-V-E. Sometimes that kind of draws the eye in and can be interesting. And the violating expectations, like I spoke about before. So a headline or a subject line like, no such thing as a vaccinated dog. Where that might tempt someone to be like, hey, I believe in vaccinations. I'm going to read this and see what they're saying. And then you go into the article, and the article doesn't have to be about that you think vaccinations are wrong, but just that maybe talking about, okay, a vaccination is only effective when A, B, and C occur, and then you can get into the nitty-gritty of, here's what our organization does with vaccinations and how you can help. I do want to caution with being clever and doing the violating expectations and questions and things like that, if you are in doubt, if you're not sure that your subject line will fly with your audience, it's always okay to stick with something clear and concise over something that's going to be clever and obscure, and maybe potentially you're not sure that it's going to resonate. Okay, some subject line don'ts, and a lot of these are a lot like our spammy don'ts. All capitals. Again, you don't really need to be yelling at people. Exclamation points. Use the words that you choose to convey urgency. Don't use exclamations. And then words like free, help, % off, reminder. Sometimes those are just kind of like noise to the reader. So you can try and avoid those in your subject line. And then finally, the last thing here is using the same subject over and over and over again. So if you are in the habit of doing a monthly e-newsletter and you do October e-news, November e-news, try and shake it up a little bit and think along the lines of something like, okay, instead of November e-news, what are puppies thankful for this November? Or something that is going to tell the reader a little bit more about what they're actually going to get if they take the time to read the e-news this month. So those are some tips there for you for subject line. Okay, the sender or from line. And I'm just going to pop over to Bloomerang here for a second and show you what I mean as far as your sender line and the from email. Okay, so when you're setting up your templates in Bloomerang, we're talking about who's it from and what's the from email here. Okay, so first and foremost, for the from email, the address you send from should look like a work-related address. If you are in the habit of sending from a Gmail address or Yahoo or AOL, really look into seeing if you can get an email that is more related to your organization. So instead of sending from k9@gmail.com, I would want to send from k9@peopleforpuppies.org. It's just a little bit better, looks a little bit more professional, a little bit more legit, like you are who you say you are. it's always a good idea to use a consistent and well-known sender name. For example, if I were sending an email out for People for Puppies, and maybe I'm a new employee, perhaps I don't really want to put my name here because the people who are going to be reading it maybe don't know who I am. So they might go, I don't know this person, I'm not going to read this right now. If you do have someone who you want to send the email from and you're fearful that people might not know their name, you can always put your organization name in there first. So I could say K9, People for Puppies. I could put K9 Director of People for Puppies. Whatever would make sense to kind of trigger people. Oh, okay, I know what this is. It's always an interesting idea or good idea to try and be consistent on who is sending out certain types of messages. It helps build some familiarity. So if you, for example, do a volunteer newsletter or volunteer emails, try and make sure they always are sent from your volunteer coordinator. So yeah, it just kind of helps the person, again, know what they're getting, who's sending it to them, make sure that they don't banish you to their spam folder or something like that. And then lastly, we would highly encourage you to not use a no reply email address. You've seen those, you've received emails with those where if you were to reply to it, it goes to some no reply and you'll get a bounce back message, and it's just unappealing. We know that you guys want to have a relationship with your audience. You want to build that trust and that loyalty and just make sure that they feel like you're talking, to them and conversing with them, not just at them. So the only way to do that is to have an email address that people can actually reply to. Okay, so when you send it is important. And we really are talking here about both the time of day and the day of the week. I can't give you a golden rule for this because it depends on who you're sending it to. But the general research, and I've indicated a couple of articles here if you want to go check out a little bit more, is that afternoon tends to be better. So the sort of 12 to 2 p.m. when people on their lunch break, the 3 to 5 p.m. when their attention is waning a little bit at work and they pop over to check their personal email, those tend to be really good times. Morning is a little dicier because people are tending to start their day focused on the work, and they might not have time to really look at their personal email. And naturally, weekdays perform much, much better than weekends. So if you're going to send something on the weekend, be really mindful of that perhaps it might be better to maybe send it on Friday instead of waiting for Saturday or Sunday. Okay, so you've got the email to the person. It got into their inbox, and they are interested enough, they're going to click on it. How can you make sure that they read it? Okay, now I said before I was going to say something that may be a little bit surprising, and here it is. I think that getting people to read what you wrote in the email isn't always that important. They can get your overall message and take the action that you desire. That's the ultimate goal. So if someone doesn't sit down and pore over every word in your email, that's not really the end of the world. But they need to read it enough to know what you're talking about. So how do we get them to do that? One thing is using the right amount of text. So I mentioned earlier with spam emails or spamminess that you don't want to do something where you have an entire email that's mostly just images. However, you have to be careful too about giving too much text in an email. So the information that I find in my research is 750 words maximum, which just to give you an idea of what 750 words looks like, I'm just going to generate some text here that is 750 words. Look at how much you can get in here. This is a lot of text. I honestly don't think I would send this much text in an email. This looks like too much to me to ask someone to take the time to do. But, you know, if it's interesting content, if it's necessary, you know, go for it. Get that 750 words, make the most of it. Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, I have a lot of good information, I really think that people would benefit from having more of the details that I want to send them. I have several articles. I get where you're coming from on that, and I wanted to propose a suggestion for those of you that have that kind of content for your email. I get I think it's daily or weekly email from the Nonprofit Hub, and I absolutely love it. I love what they do here. They give me some images, so that's something fun to look at, and they give me these nice little snippets of an article. And then they say, okay, if you want to read more, click here. So they can get a lot of ideas across to me. Worst word to hear from volunteers. Content, making your content go viral. Down and dirty basics. They can give me all this info in one email, and then if I want more, it's easy for me to click on the link and go out to the organization's website. This is brilliant, I think, because A, I always read their emails. I know that I can get some quick tips and shoot out to read more in the articles. B, they get me going to their website every time they send me an email. And that's phenomenal. That falls into that last category we're going to talk about getting people to do something. So they've got me here. If this was your email that had come to me and I'd clicked to read more, I'd be on your website. You've got hopefully a nice big donate now button up here tempting me to click and make a donation. And that's what we want to have happen. So we talked a moment ago about these large blocks of text. Just to give you an example that isn't dummy text, here's an email that someone did send out, just this huge, huge block of text. Really, this is probably less than the 750 words, but it sure doesn't look like it. So when you're putting in your text, make sure that you're breaking things up with images and with headings so that it's a little easier to read. I'm going to pop over to Bloomerang for just a second and show you a nice example of this. So we've got quite a bit of text in here, but we've got nice little headings to kind of draw the eye. We've used some colors and things to kind of help break things up, and just it's a lot more appealing to someone to read than this gigantic block of text here. Okay. So next thing is you're going to put some images in your email. You want to do it correctly. Okay. And the first thing I want to impress on everyone in here is I never, ever, ever want you to send an email that is just one giant image. And let me show you why. I'm sure some of you have seen emails like this where it looks like this. You open it up and there is absolutely nothing. That's because most email programs will filter out images by default. And then the recipient actually has to choose to display the images. Now they can do that, and if they did in this case, they would get this great email. Look how beautiful it is. But you're taking the chance that that person's going to actually do that, that they're going to know that that's what's happened here and not just think it's broken, and that they're going to take the time to click on that and load that image. That's a chance that I would not be willing to take. So instead of doing something like this, images are great, but you want to make sure that all of the real meat, all of the important content is not trapped in an image. It should be text, okay? Because when you do that, then the person, instead of seeing this blank screen when they come in, will get this. Okay, so this person still has not loaded the images up, but they're going to get the contents of my email, and that's what's key here. Another thing that you want to make sure you do is set your image description. So let me show you what I mean by that. Again, I'm going to come back to this email that I just received here. This image didn't load for me, but I have a nice little description here that's telling me what this image pertains to. So in Bloomerang, where we do this is when you're editing the image, it's right here. So just make sure each time you put an image into your email, set the description on that image to let the person know what they'll get if they load the image into their email program. Super simple, super easy to do. Okay, the next thing that we want to recommend is using smaller image files. So I don't know if any of you have been setting up a template in Bloomerang and you go to add an image and it tells that your image file is too big. And by too big, we don't mean that it's taking up too much space on screen. We mean that the file itself is too big. It's over 1 megabyte and we're not going to let you upload it that way. And there's good reason for this. These email programs are filtering out the images by default, but if someone says, hey, I do want to display these images, if you have this gigantic image that needs to load up when they do that, it can take a while. And anything that's going to, any time that the person's going to have to spend where they're not getting your content, they're doing other things, they're going to navigate away, they're not going to sit there and wait for something huge to load up. So I wanted to offer some resources for actually reducing the size of your image file. I love this tool called JPEG Mini. I'm just going to minimize my screen here and show you JPEG Mini. This is a free tool for up to 20 image compressions per day. It does a fantastic job. You don't really lose much quality of the image when you compress them this way. And you can do an entire folder of images at once. So if you have a lot going into your email, you don't have to do them one by one. So just to show you how simple this is, if I take this file here, so I want to put this picture of my little puppy Penny into my email. It's 1.65 megabytes. Bloomerang's not going to let me do that. So I drag it over to JPEG Mini, and it takes a quick second, and it resizes it for me. So I go over to my resized images. Now there's my image. Still looks really, really good. Even if I blow it up big, it's still going to look nice. But now it's only 700 kilobytes. Much, much better. So some limitations of the JPEG Mini tool are that it is only for JPEGs. So there are some other options here if you have different image file types that you want to use. This radical image optimization tool, Smush It, Kraken, any of those can help you resize your images. And I believe that the Riot is one that you have to install, while Smush It and Kraken you can use online. And they can do the other file types as well. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about with images is just the image to text ratio. The best thing I keep finding, the answer I keep coming up with is no more than 25% of the email should be images. I think you can play around with that a little bit if you want to go a little higher on your images, but that's a nice goal to kind of keep in mind in making sure that you don't go overboard and then start to venture into, okay, I look like a spammer again. Okay, so this next one, I would advise you to make your email pretty. Now, do you have to spend thousands of dollars on a web designer and have them create something that's just absolutely stunning? No, of course not. But you do want to make it at least visually attractive enough that it's readable, it's legible, it's something that someone doesn't open and go, ooh, I don't want to read this. So just to give you some examples from the other end of the spectrum of the kind of yucky ones, look at this guy here. I don't mean to pick on whoever designed this, but this is just, I don't even want to look at it. It hurts my eyes. Way too much going on. Too many colors, too many images. It's just too much. Okay, now this one, I feel like I'm picking on this poor email a little bit because it's overall not that bad. They've got text in there telling me the important details. They haven't put in too many images. It's okay. But where I think this goes wrong is that there's a whole lot of colors going on. There's a lot of bright primary blue and yellow and green and red. And then they've repeated this pattern of doing all these colors here in the fonts, and it's a little bit much. They did make two other mistakes that I would avoid. One of them being they have this light gray font on a white background, which is difficult to read. Now this email is a coupon, so these are the additional terms, and they probably don't want you looking at them too intently. But you guys are probably not including that kind of stuff in your email, right? You are including things that people should be able to read. So just be wary of that. And then the other, I would say, misstep here is they've included an image that kind of looks like clip art. I would avoid that. You know, for your images, make them meaningful, make them powerful images, preferably ones that you have taken. That's always the best. Find a really good one that really conveys the emotion or the information that you're trying to get across, and use that over a clip art or a stock image. That wins hands down. Okay, so my advice for making it pretty or Purty. Think of the colors and fonts in your email like you're putting together an outfit or you know, styling something, maybe styling a room in a home. You want to pick things that look good together, and you don't want to have too much going on because it'll actually distract from the message you're trying to get across. So colors and fonts tend to be where people kind of get out of control, so I wanted to talk about those for a minute. Selecting colors, as I mentioned before, a lot of bright colors together can be a little distracting, can be a little garish, maybe not really fitting with your organization. What I would recommend is maybe trying to match your organization's brand. I think this is always a good idea. Match your brand, get your email templates set up how you like, and then just be consistent. Stick with the same colors, the same overall style, and you can't really go wrong. So how to match your organization's brand? Well, there's some tips that you can use. I am not a designer. I can't tell you one color code from another, but I have some tools at my disposal that can help it look like I am. So I have picked a website from one of the attendees. I hope that you don't mind. It's the Children's Village. I think that this website has some really nice colors in it, this taupey kind of beige, nice vibrant red, a little yellowy, and orange. And if you wanted to use these colors in an email, it's sometimes difficult if you come into this area to pick the color just by picking it on this. If you're really looking to match it 100%, that's a little difficult. So what I would recommend is using a tool that helps you figure out the color code. And there's a really, really simple, really lovely one called Color Picker. I think I don't have a window for it here. Let me go back. Colorzilla. This is a free plugin if you are using Chrome or Firefox, and you just install it, and then the way it works is it has a nice little icon up here. So open up your website, click the icon, and then hover over the color that you're interested in. So in this case, let's say I wanted to find this pretty beigey taupey color. I'm going to click on that, and it tells me the color code and copies it to the clipboard. So if I were to come back here to my email, all I have to do is paste that in. And now that's going to match. Ta-da! Now I obviously would not want to do that background in the middle of my font and everything. It makes it difficult to read. But I could put that here. I could use it as my separator color, and I can play around with how I bring the colors together. Now another thing that I would recommend is really sticking with maybe 3 colors maximum. I tend to think that more than that, you can get yourself into trouble. So that's probably the most that I would do. Another tool, if you are trying to pick out specific colors, is this image color picker. This is a nice one. It's online. You don't have to install a plugin. All you have to do is upload an image of the color that you want. So if you have a picture that you're trying to match, or if you have your organization's logo, you upload it there, and then you click on the area that you are interested in, and again, you've got your color code right there. So maybe, let's say you're not 100% that you want to use the same colors as your organization's brand, or maybe you want to branch out and add some other colors in. I've linked you to a couple of different color scheme visualizers that I really like. This one here is Color Scheme Designer. It's really fun. You start off by picking the sort of starting color, so maybe my organization has red, and then you can say, okay, do I want to do complementary, the analog or analogous, the tetrad. Okay, great, these are some colors that can be together. This is maybe a little bright. I can adjust the scheme by taking the contrast down or the saturation down, and I've got some really good colors that look good together. As you see, as I'm hovering over, again, they're giving you that hexadecimal code so that you could come back over and just plug that right into your template. Okay, oh, and color hexa I like even more, because after you've picked out that exact hex code, you can pop that in here, and then they're going to give you a whole bunch of information about analogous colors. Again, I can grab the hex code here. They show you what it would look like being the font color on different backgrounds or being the background color, and then they give you some color blindness simulators, which is just really cool. So if someone in your audience was perhaps colorblind, this is what they might see. Always good to know. Okay, so main thing to keep in mind, don't pick too many colors. Don't pick too many bright, strong colors together. Just try and pick ones that really go well together and don't distract from your message. The same thing with fonts. I think it's best to stick with 2 fonts maximum. So one font for your headings and one font for your text seems to work really, really well. Some tips for readability are that for your body text, so let me go ahead and change this back because I can't read that at all with my old eyes. Okay, let's change that back. So for your body text, which is here, this light blue, and then here the smaller fonts, that's going to be things like the sans serif fonts. So Arial, Tahoma, Trebuchet, Verdana, those are all good sans serif fonts for your body. For the headings, it's a little bit easier to go with the serif fonts because it kind of draws the eye. They may not be as readable as the sans serif, but they will draw the eye more, and your heading really shouldn't be a huge long line to read anyway. It should just be brief. Dark font on a light background tends to work the best. Obviously, I don't always follow that. I like sometimes mixing it up. But for readability, dark font on light background tends to work best. And then the 10-point minimum. And you'll notice that in Bloomerang, we don't actually use a point scale. We use pixels, and that's because you're editing through a web app. But I gave you a link here if you are ever curious about the pixels to points, like if I want to do 16-point font, how many pixels is that? This nice link here goes to a little table that tells you how many pixels that should be. Just know that 13 pixels is probably the smallest that you should be using if you want to make sure that your email is readable. Okay, this slide is, this is probably just a little bit cheeky here. Of course, you want to provide good content. And we could spend an entire hour or several hours on this. If you guys are interested in it, let us know, and that's what we'll do. But the main thing is, if you're not writing relevant, interesting things, people are going to stop reading your emails. So just keep that in mind. The frequency with which you send your emails, make sure you're not sending so often that you don't have good content to keep people interested. Okay. So this is my last thing I wanted to talk about, which you've got someone to open your email. They didn't immediately close it because it was ugly or hard to read or overwhelmingly long. So what are they going to do now that they've read your email? You want to have something that they can do afterwards. What's an action that you want them to take? So is reading the email enough? Sometimes it can be. If you are just looking to get the word out, you want awareness about a certain issue, or you are wanting to thank the person or just send them some feel-good cultivation type stuff. Then having them read the email, that can be enough. That's still accomplishing those goals. But it's always nice to give them something to do afterwards anyway. For one thing, if they're opening the email, great. You can tell that in Bloomerang. We track that for you. But how do you know they read it? There's really nothing saying that when someone opened your email, they did something with it, unless you give them some links to click. So this is always a good idea, and I'm sure none of you are sending emails with no links. But just in case you are, start putting links in there. Start giving them something to do, because we are going to track those link clicks for you. So you can see, okay, this person opened it and then they did this. It's a fantastic way to find out what is interesting to people about your email by seeing where they click. And it's a fantastic way to know that, yes, your content is getting through to them. Okay, so a couple of tips for using links properly. Linking to related content on your site, yes, do it. Do it, do it, do it. We talked about nonprofit hub email, and I think it's brilliant. You know, have a little bit of the content in your email, link out to read more. They go to your website, you can track that link click. They can donate from there, they can sign up. Just do it, it's a good idea. Link to your donation page, yes, even in a newsletter. You don't have to be super obvious and make it a hard ask, but definitely have a link to your donation page so that if someone's moved by your content, they can get straight to that page and get started making a donation. And then the links themselves should make sense. They should be useful. They should flow naturally from the content of your email. So you don't really want to be linking to something random just to put a link in there. Okay, so formatting the links. There are a couple different things that you want to do. One, you want to make them stand out from your other content. Bold, underline, you can use the typical link blue color, that's fine. You can use other colors if you like, it's just got to be something that stands out. So let me show you what another template I have set up here looks like. If you look at this email, and let's say that someone got this email, took the time to open it, but maybe this person's a little bit busy and they're kind of a skimmer. I want these links to jump out at them. I want these to be the things that they see if they don't see anything else. So having them be this contrasting purple color, you know, it's not the same as the gray and the green that I have everywhere else, helps them kind of pop out at the reader. A really good tip that I found is if you're looking at your email, try blurring your eyes and just see, can you still see where all the links are? If you can't, then think about using some different formatting for those links because they're maybe not going to jump out to people. Another thing you want to make sure you do is don't use generic phrases for your link text. So click here is not good link text. The reasoning is, let's say you're that busy person and you're the one that's kind of skimming and the only thing you're going to get out of this message is these links. If these just say click here, it's absolutely meaningless. You're not moved at all to do anything. If they say something like 30 days is all they get, oh, what is this? You know, that's an article about these shelter dogs, or, oh yeah, I want to donate. Here's my donate link. Oh, puppy foster parent, what's that mean? Let's look into that. So definitely you want to stick with text that actually indicates what the person is going to get from the link. So a little example, click here for info on parvovirus. You can really easily just, in the body of the email, just parvovirus is linked right there. We all know now from using the internet for however many years that this is a link and that you're going to get more information on parvovirus by clicking it. You do not need to tell them to click here. Okay, a couple more link formatting tips. Keep your link text short, 2 to 5 words maximum. I think I broke that rule a little bit here. 30 days is all they get. Yeah, I went over a little bit. That's okay. What you do not want to do is take an entire paragraph and make it a link. For one thing, it doesn't look like a link anymore when you do that. So how is the person even going to know that that's a link? For another, this can make you look like you are spamming or phishing. I actually had some research to do for someone who said, why are my emails getting sent to spam? I don't know what's going on here. Well, it turned out that they had an entire paragraph that was made into a link, and Gmail thought that they were phishing. So don't do that. Couple words maximum. Set a title on your links. So again, when you're editing the link, you got that nice little edit window. You just want to make sure you have a title, which, oh, look at me, I did not set one. Shame on me. So here I would say that this is going to be a Humane Society article, maybe. And then what happens is in the email, if you have a title on there, then the person can actually hover over it and see what they're getting into if they wanted a little bit more information. So always a good thing to do. And then finally, just make sure that the link goes where it should, that the page is not broken. Just send yourself a test email, test out all your links. I believe even Mail Tester does that for you, so no broken links. That's good. That's a good start. Those links all work. It's also good just to verify that the link that you linked to is the one that you said you linked to, because sometimes with copying the templates and redoing the content, it's easy to inadvertently link out to the wrong thing. So just be sure. Okay, I talked about this before, the link tracking. It occurs automatically in Bloomerang. You will see the link tracking on the interaction. Let me just show you. So I had sent myself that nice rescue puppies message. There we go, there's my images. I can go out to this article and do some reading. Now, if I go look up my record and take a look at my timeline, I can see that email. I can see that I opened it, and I can see which links I clicked. And you can get all of these details into a report as well. So you could run a report for the entire mailing and just see what kind of action you're getting on the links in your mailing as a whole. Okay, so that is all the information I have for you guys today. Stephen, are we ready to do some questions?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. That was great. We have a few minutes, probably 10 minutes before the 2 o'clock Eastern hour. So if anyone had any questions about any of the material, please feel free to send that along through the chat box right on your webinar screen. And we'll give you a few moments to maybe type those out or think of something that maybe you wanted explained or divulged upon further. And while you do that, I'll just mention briefly that we do these webinars once a month. We will have one next month in December. So look for that registration link to hit your email inbox a little later in December. And also this webinar has been recorded, so we will be sending out the replay video of this in case you wanted to watch it and review some of the great content that Melissa shared. So look for that to arrive from me a little later today. And I know that we didn't dig too much into the actual email application in Bloomerang, but Melissa wanted to give you a nice intro into some best practices before we kind of unleash you in the tool itself. So Melissa, thanks again for all that great information.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And it looks like Sarah just asked if we'll be emailing out the slides. And yes, we will email out the slides along with the recording. So you'll be able to click all those really great links to some resources that Melissa shared. So I'll give it a last call for questions, but if there aren't any additional questions, I think we'll end it there. So,
okay.
Melissa, any final thoughts on email? Any words of wisdom that you might want to share with us?
Oh man, like the remaining 5 minutes? No, but I do want to say if people are interested, we can do other sessions on email where we focus in more on using the Bloomerang tool specifically, where we talk more about content. Email is a huge area. There's a lot of stuff to cover. So just let us know what you guys want to hear about.
Yeah, definitely. And when you leave this webinar, you'll be presented with a little feedback form. So feel free to fill out that form, email me separately, email Melissa, tell us what you thought of the webinar. This is only the third one we've done, and we definitely appreciate any feedback. We'll try to make any improvements that you guys suggest to make these webinars more helpful. And we definitely will be diving into the actual email tool. So Sue, for you who just asked that question, you won't miss anything. We'll definitely dive into that in future webinars. So I think we'll end it there, Melissa. So thanks again.
Thank you.
And
thanks, everyone.
yeah, thanks for everyone who listened, and have a great rest of your afternoon.